Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. On today's program, I am here to discuss my full review of the Preacher series finale. So, for those of you who have not seen the episode, this is your, as usual, spoiler warning. So, if you are not caught up, haven't seen this episode, well, you might want to turn back now. Otherwise, if you don't care to know all the details, then go ahead, pull yourself up a chair, grab yourself a bottle of some of that fine rat water, because Preacher series finale, my review, starts right now. In case you guys have missed my little short non-spoiler review, I will say that I really did enjoy this episode a lot. In fact, I believe that the final episode, without a doubt, saved this season. I think that I have made it clear from my previous reviews that I was not really digging this season at all. In fact, I find it overall to be rather disappointing, but I will save that topic for another day. But as of this video, I am here to focus entirely on the final episode. So where do I begin? I will say that a lot of these characters have gotten great final send-offs. I really liked how they ended Featherstone's story. I thought that Julianne Emery did a fantastic job, especially in her final moments. Featherstone confronts Herr Starr about his plans and how she feels betrayed. And, well, Herr Starr ended up stabbing her in the back, shooting her on the tarp, which she said that she was going to do to him, but obviously that plan completely backfired on her and she ended up dead. It was a great scene, and it was a fitting moment for Featherstone. Hey, she stuck to her principles, and I give her credit for that. I can't imagine how she was feeling, and she was not gonna let some man that she thought that she was madly in love with completely trample over her beliefs. So I will give her massive credit for sticking up to her beliefs, sticking up to her principles, even though that resulted in the end of her life. And of course, I loved the ending for God. He definitely got his comeuppance, wouldn't you agree? I loved how they set it up for his inevitable downfall, because shit started to go badly wrong for poor God, with losing his beloved son Humperdew, and then the poor redheaded stepchild Jesus ends up turning his back on him when God insisted that he be the one to cause the apocalypse to happen, since Humperdew was killed at that point. And Jesus was like, no, get the hell out of here, bitch. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. So, and then all this shit just started happening for God, and he said, you know what, fuck it, I'm out of here. You know, get in my dog suit and just yeet myself out like the slimy coward that I am. Jesse gets wind of God being at the Alamo. Oh, yeah, going back to that, kind of sidetrack a bit. I loved how Jesse, Tulip, and Cassie, they infiltrate the base, and God leaves, and Jesse uses his power to tell everyone that's there in the audience that, yeah, you guys are going to be my little bitches. You're going to be the ones who are going to help me find God come hell or high water. And so you flash forward 2 years later, and they ended up catching up to God. And Jesse gets the wind of it. He shows up at the Alamo, and there's a somewhat pleasant conversation taking place between God and Jesse, and the way how it ended, where it's just crazy to think that all this shit that God did because he wanted love from Jesse, and Jesse refused to give it to him. In fact, he ended up giving God quite an ass beating, and it was a glorious ass beating. Hey, he said back in season 1 that he was going to God's ass. And he certainly kept to his word on that. And it really was a great scene. And of course, it just makes me think what would have happened if Jesse actually did tell God that he loved him, or that he did give what God wanted, and that was his love. Then, right after his humiliation from Jesse, God goes in back into his trailer and destroys all of the specimens that he had created that he was going to use as his next grand design. He was going to use these specimens as to be replacements for humans. And here he is killing these poor things as they're telling him that they love him. And it's kind of sad, and but at the same time, it really goes to show you just the mindset of how fucked up God really is. And it was a good little scene. And then right after that, he ends up going right back up to heaven, and he is confronted by the Saint of Killers. Now, earlier, before Jesse faces off against the Saint of Killers in one fantastic fight sequence between him, the Seraphim, and the demon facing off against the Saint of Killers. And of course, it was revealed at this point that the Seraphim and the demon lady were, or are, Genesis's parents. And of course, those two are killed off by the Saint. And it was revealed at this point when the Saint confronts God that he made a deathbed confession to Jesse, and that's how he managed to get himself up to heaven. This was, of course, right before Jesse kills the Saint. And of course, back at that point, you're thinking, oh, that's it for the Saint? Really? So it was a really nice little twist with the whole him confessing to Jesse about his desires just before he's killed, and that grants him his soul to go back up to heaven. So he confronts God, and God, of course, is trying to plead with him, telling him all these things about, that he'll be granted a powerful being in the gates of heaven. And the Saint is just not having any of it. And, well, sure enough, ends up using his guns and shoots and kills God dead right in the head. And the Saint takes his place on the throne of heaven. It was a great send off for the Saint. He probably had one of the best conclusions to a story. And then we come to Eugene Root, aka Arseface, that one character that everyone, or at least I think it's safe to say that a good majority of the fandom just loves this character because he's just so sweet and endearing, and it's just really unfair all the shit that he's went through. He was one of the few characters in the final episode that actually got a happy ending, and rightfully deserved. This poor kid had been through a lot, with nearly trying to attempt suicide and it failing miserably, and it cost him his looks. And then we get him getting unfairly banished to hell by Jesse, and him having to crawl his way out of hell with the help of Hitler, of all people. So for him to actually go through what he went through, and he brought his little acoustic guitar out of getting his way out of the hospital after nearly being convinced into killing himself by an Aussie Dr. Kevorkian. He is out on the streets and starts playing, and eventually he ends up becoming a rock star. And for those of you like myself who have read the comics, this for sure was probably a very, very good feeling. It was a very awesome point that we actually got this in the show. Now, I won't say, for those of you who have not read the comics, I will not say where at the point in the storyline he became a rock star, but let's just say this was definitely a very fitting ending to his character. And he, like I said, it's a very good ending, and one of the few happy endings that we got for some of these characters. Next, we get to another character that got a happy ending, and I don't know why, and that would be Hair Star. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Hair Star. I love him as a character. I think he is a fantastic villain. Pip Torrens has done a wonderful job bringing Star to life from the pages of the comic because he plays his character right to a T. He's very similar to his comic counterpart. And I cannot express how fantastic of a job Pip Torrens did with this character. But I'm just really baffled as to how he just managed to get a happy ending after all this shit that he's done. This was one of the things that I really did not like about this episode was how they ended Hairstar's character. Sure, it was funny watching him on the golf course and he has grown his hair out and he gets caught by the cops, ends up running from the cops and killing them. And yeah, he basically gets away scot-free. And I just don't understand why they've chosen to give him a happy ending. As I said, after everything that he's done with putting Jesse through hell, putting everyone through hell, I don't know if this was their way of saying that even though he was not a religious type, it's only the religious people that get the bad endings. I just don't know. Personally, I just really did not dig his ending. And I think he really should have died. There's not much left for me to say with some of the other somewhat minor characters. Well, I mean, they're not really minor characters, but characters like Jesus and Hitler. Hitler obviously got what he deserved by getting his ass beaten to death by Jesus. And then Jesus would be, I don't know if he's a manager or just an employee, but he works for a hardware store, which is very fitting given that Jesus was supposedly a carpenter. And I liked the Easter egg of the customer with the Eugene shirt on, because, yeah, at this point, Eugene had become a big rock star. But yeah, there's really not much to say. I did like that Jesus got a pretty sweet ending, and Hitler, as I said, obviously got what he deserved. Then, of course, I save what would be the best for last, and that being our main three, Jesse, Tulip, and Cassidy. And I don't know how to feel about their endings. Sure, it was a very bittersweet ending, but there's just some things that I kind of have issues with how their story ended. Yes, I liked that we actually got closure to Jesse and God. I was a little worried about that because we were getting towards the very end of the episode, and I thought, oh, great, so they're just going to leave God out in the open. We're just going to get an open ending with that. But luckily, they did wrap that up with the confrontation between Jesse and God. But I can't help but feel a little bothered by how the stories were wrapped up. For instance, Jesse and Tulip. Now, after God had escaped, there was a 2-year flash forward where Jesse and Tulip apparently are living a somewhat happy life back in Texas, and they had a daughter together. And I'm going to be fully blunt here. I don't get how their relationship was portrayed. To me, they did not come off as a couple that were truly in love with each other. In fact, the way how Dominic Cooper and Ruth Negga portrayed Jesse and Tulip's relationship, it was almost like as if they were on the verge of a breakup or they had broken up, and at this point they were really good friends. I was not really getting that vibe from them that they were in love with each other, really, that it wasn't really a romantic relationship. And I get it, you don't want to get completely cheesy with the romances, but they couldn't even kiss. There was really no there was no indication that these two were in love with each other. If you look at the source material, Jesse and Tulip were madly, madly in love with each other. They would have literally died for each other if it came down to it. And it wasn't just this episode, it was just probably going as far back as season 3, how these two have portrayed Jesse and Tulip's relationship. And I think I know why. So, for those of you who don't know, Dominic Cooper and Ruth Negga were a couple. They had been together for several years, and it was around, I believe, either season 1 or season 2 filming, it was announced that they had broken up. And I think that really showed in the show. I get it. Yes, actors, they're actors. They should be able to do this kind of stuff, but if you think about it, if you were an actor and you were working with someone who you were involved in a very serious relationship with for so many years, imagine breaking up and then having to continue to work with them and play a couple on a show. You can imagine that's got to feel very awkward for them. And I have a feeling that the writers felt that way, or that they felt that maybe it would be best to underplay their relationship, Jesse and Tulip's relationship, I mean. And I think that had a pretty negative effect. And to me, it showed in this final episode. I just did not get the vibe that Jesse and Tulip were very happy with each other and that they were going to live happily ever after. But that's just my 2 cents on the matter. I don't know if anyone else got the same vibe as I did. Certainly, I can't be the only one who felt that way. And then we get to another thing that I really did not like about how it ended. So at the very end of the episode, there was a 40-year flashback, and we cut to a cemetery. And this was when Jesse and Tulip had obviously passed away. There's their gravestones right there. And it turns out Cassidy is there, and he's talking to Jesse and Tulip's daughter about Jesse and Tulip, her parents. And he decided that life was no longer worth living. He was going to walk off into the sun, burn himself up, and die, and go live with Jesse and Tulip or be reunited with them in the afterlife. And I get where they were going with this, but the problem is that it had been established before that Cassidy had pretty much cut his contact with Jesse and Tulip. And it doesn't make sense for him to all of a sudden decide that after 40 years to just go ahead and just decide to end his own life. Now, I get it that he was close friends with Jesse and Tulip, but as I said, that he's lost contact with them. And believe it or not, when you lose contact with a close friend, you don't think about wanting to decide, oh yeah, I'm going to go on ahead and take my own life, even though I've stopped talking to my friends over 40 years ago. You kind of decide to just move on with your life. And I thought that that's something that Cassidy would have done. I thought that he would have just fucked right off and just go back to living how he had been living before he met Jesse and Tulip. Or I thought that maybe he would decide that he was going to settle down and start a family, or, find a nice girl, start a family. I just don't see him all of a sudden deciding he's just going to end his own life over 2 friends that he's lost contact with many, many, many years ago. He didn't do that with his son Dennis when he just decided to just cut ties with Dennis and no longer talk to him or no longer have a relationship with him, with his own son, for crying out loud. Why would he decide to just no longer want to be around on this earth over 2 friends when he didn't even do that with his own son? Do you guys know exactly what I mean by this? Personally, I think that how it should have ended was that they would have kept Cassidy still friends with Jesse and Tulip, that they still have a close bond, and I think it would have been more impactful if they did some sort of montage of, say, Cassidy doing things with Jesse and Tulip and forming a close bond with their daughter. And throughout the years, like, say you have the big milestones like her graduating high school and her getting married, and you see the transition of Jesse and Tulip. You could obviously tell that they're getting older, and you get that inkling that they're not going to be around much longer. I think if they would have done that and they would have kept Cassidy in contact with Jesse and Tulip and still close with them, I think that this ending would have had a much bigger emotional impact than it did. I get again where they were going with this ending, and I thought it would have been a very fitting ending if they would have just tweaked it around a little bit, as I said before, with my ideas, in keeping the three in contact with each other and still maintain that close bond. But despite what I consider to be flaws, overall, I thought this was a very fitting ending, and it did not anger me like the ending to Game of Thrones did. At least with Preacher, with the way it ended, I can go back and watch the series from the beginning and watch it from start to finish and still feel somewhat satisfactory by the conclusion. Now, I'm curious to know exactly what you guys think. I leave it up to you. Like, how do you feel about how Preacher ended? Did you like the ending? Did you feel that there's certain things that they could have done to improve it? Did you hate the ending? I'm curious to know what you think, so definitely leave a comment down below. And thanks for watching. And until next time, dear friends, this is Cynical Lindsay, signing off.